Good morning, folks. This is Mr. Dan coming to you from the Landscape Design Classroom, and today we're going to talk about the merits of mechanical weed control. Our main idea here, how can producers take better advantage of mechanical weed control to reduce or eliminate the amount of chemical weed killers required? Our photo down here shows plastic mulch and soil solarization reducing the need for chemical controls. So we'll get a little bit more into how this all works out here momentarily. So let's get into some weeds. Definition would be a plant that is out of place, a challenge for farmers and producers. Doing nothing equals a variety of weeds, highly competitive, and can develop resistance to chemicals. So even if you are using pesticides on crops for a long-term exposure, sometimes those weeds coming up will develop an immunity to those. So the overall best treatment is to always just pull them out or figure out a different way. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So some basic weed control methods, cultural practices, biological controls, chemical weed controls, and mechanical controls. So let's talk about our first one, cultural practices. Useful for reducing weeds. Some examples of this would be crop rotation, timing of field operations, and crop and variety selection. And some factors to consider would be cropping system, weed species, weather, and cost. So biological controls, using a living organism to control a specific pest. Examples of this would be using cover crops for weed control, allelopathic effects of certain plants such as rye, fescue, and wheat, which suppress weeds. So switching your crops out is usually a really good way of reducing your crop issues. And then using different types of plants can actually reduce your weed populations as well. So chemical weed control, chemical herbicides, pre-emergent applied to the soil before planting, post-emergent applied to growing plants. In the landscape industry, we use a lot of pre-emergents to make sure we don't get any crabgrass coming up, other weeds in general too. We try to keep violets out of the lawn. So there is a lot of pre-emergent stuff. And then for your post-emergent, that's after everything is starting to come out of the ground and maybe even fully blooming at the point you want to spray it. So National Organic Program only allows some natural herbicides, no synthetic chemicals. Mechanical controls, kills or suppresses weeds by physically disrupting them. That means like you're pulling them out or you're using a machine to get them out. So examples here would be hand pull, digging, disking, plowing, and mowing. Soil solarization, flamethrowers, and prescribed burning, or mulching. So more like mechanical controls used throughout history, still used in some forms by most farms, often used along with some form of chemical control. So there are a lot of farmers out there not only tilling and doing a lot of mechanical control, pulling weeds out, but they're also putting chemicals down to help with keeping those weeds from either emerging or killing them off once they post-emerge. So our mechanical controls here in a comparison, more labor intensive, less purchased inputs, and higher risk of soil erosion. Our chemical controls are less labor, more purchased inputs, and higher risk of pesticide residues in the groundwater. But we want to be careful what we're putting down pesticide-wise because we don't want to contaminate the ground any more than is already needed. So ways to reduce herbicide use: apply at lower rates, banding herbicide only on rows with mechanical cultivation between rows, and may reduce crop yields. So some concerns with reduced rates of herbicides: extra labor for cultivation, increased field management for weed identification, weather monitoring, and timing, may not be suitable for all situations, and no manufacturer's liability. And also, timely cultivation is a must. So keeping on a schedule, even if you were using higher rates of pesticides, is always a great idea because you want to make sure you're keeping everything and doing it in a timely manner. So some trade-offs with reduced herbicides: more labor and management needs, less chance of groundwater pollution, may require a combination of cultivation and chemicals, and requires knowledge of problem weeds. And also to go along with, may need increased planting rates. So you're reducing the amount of chemicals you're using, but you may have to put more plants in and you may end up spending more money on labor. So our bottom line here, mechanical cultivation is one method used to control and kill weeds. It is often used in combination with cultural practices, biological controls, and chemical herbicides. To kind of rushing through this a little bit today, personally, I find mechanical controls to be the best single way of getting rid of weeds once they've emerged from the ground. Well, you can do stuff like plowing, tilling in the landscape industry, ensuring that there's no weeds in the ground whenever you're putting stuff in, but you may not always catch that. So weed pulling is probably the most archaic, but still most effective way to mechanically control anything from plants. But as the end of my lecture, if you have any questions at all, give me a call down here in the landscape design classroom. I appreciate your time, folks, and have a great day.